Stop scrolling for a second. If you've ever worked with an American and wondered how they can casually disagree with their own boss in a meeting like it's nothing, the real answer isn't confidence. It's a plane crash. Several of them, actually. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why an entire culture decided that staying quiet is more dangerous than speaking up. Here's the pattern people notice the second they start working with Americans. Nobody defers. A 25-year-old will question an executive's plan in front of the whole room. An intern will raise a hand and say, "I think that's wrong." In most of the world, that's social suicide. In America, it's Tuesday. So why? It starts with something researchers call power distance. Basically, how much a culture believes that people higher up the ladder deserve automatic deference. Countries with high power distance treat a boss's word as close to final. The United States sits near the bottom of that scale. Americans are raised to believe that a bad idea is a bad idea, no matter whose mouth it came out of. And that belief didn't come out of nowhere. It's baked into decades of American storytelling. Think about it. The hero in almost every classic American film is the person who refuses to shut up. The sheriff who won't back down. The outsider who tells the room they're all wrong. American media doesn't just tolerate that person, it worships them. But here's where this stops being a fun cultural quirk and starts being a matter of life and death. In the 1970s and 80s, aviation investigators noticed something disturbing. In several countries with strict cockpit hierarchies, junior co-pilots were spotting fatal problems and saying nothing, because questioning the captain felt unthinkable. Investigators traced multiple real crashes directly back to a co-pilot who noticed the danger, hesitated to speak bluntly, and by the time they did, it was too late. The fix wasn't better instruments, it was psychological. Airlines rebuilt cockpit culture from scratch, under a system now called Crew Resource Management. The new rule was blunt. If you're the captain, you are never allowed to say, "Shut up, I'm in charge." If you're not the captain, you are never allowed to just swallow your concerns. Speaking up became a safety requirement, not an act of rebellion. That single mindset shift is basically the American default setting for every workplace, not just cockpits. Compliance officers are expected to flag their own boss's mistake. Engineers are expected to say, "This bridge design has a problem," even if a senior partner signed off on it. Silence isn't seen as respectful in American professional culture. It's seen as negligence, which flips the entire equation most of the world runs on. In a lot of cultures, staying quiet protects you. In America, staying quiet is what gets you in trouble. Now here's the part that really throws people off when they first moved to the US for work. Americans are taught this from childhood. Walk into an American classroom and you'll often find desks arranged in a circle, specifically so no one can hide in the back. Class participation is literally graded. Kids are called on, expected to answer, expected to have an opinion. And if they stay silent too often, that shows up on their report card as a problem, not a virtue. By the time these kids become adults, raising a hand and disagreeing isn't scary. It's muscle memory. They've been doing it since they were 6 years old. There's a military angle here, too, that historians love to point to. During World War II, American forces were famously less rigid about rank than many of their opponents. Privates would question orders. Commanders, more often than not, actually listened. That flexibility reportedly baffled opposing forces, who were trained around strict top-down command. Take out the top officer in a rigid hierarchy, and the unit below often freezes. Take out the leadership in a flatter, more individualistic structure, and, as one historian dryly put it, the response tends to be, everyone just starts improvising and gets aggressive about it. But it's not just about bravery. There's a darker flip side nobody talks about. Speaking up in America comes with real social risk, and it's not evenly distributed. Ask American women in professional settings and you'll hear a very consistent story. The same blunt email that gets a male coworker called direct gets a woman called aggressive or pulled aside for a talk about her tone. The culture rewards speaking up, but it doesn't always reward it equally. There's also a comparison worth making here, because Americans get compared to their neighbors constantly. Canadians and Brits, for example, are often seen from the outside as similarly confident. But people who've worked across all three describe a real difference. Americans tend to say the actual thing. Some neighboring English-speaking cultures are famous for saying something polite that secretly means the opposite, and you're expected to just know that. Americans mostly skip that step. If something's a problem, they'll usually just tell you it's a problem.
Wow.
So put it all together. No built-in reverence for hierarchy, a media culture that turns the person who speaks up into the hero of the story, a professional culture literally rebuilt around a real body count, a school system that grades kids on participation starting in kindergarten, and a national identity built by people who left everything behind to go start over somewhere else. That's not a coincidence. That's a system, engineered, sometimes accidentally, sometimes on purpose, to produce people who talk. And once you see the system, the behavior stops looking like arrogance and starts looking like design. It also explains something that trips a lot of people up. Americans being told they're punished for staying quiet sounds backwards if you grew up somewhere silence equals safety. But inside American offices and classrooms, silence when you clearly disagree isn't read as humility. It's read as either not paying attention, or worse, seeing a problem and choosing to let it happen. Neither one looks good on a performance review. Of course, not every American is a natural extrovert who loves the sound of their own voice in a meeting. Plenty of them are quietly terrified the first time they have to disagree with a boss, too. The difference is what happens next, because the whole surrounding system, from grade school onward, has spent years training them to push through that fear instead of obey it. And honestly, look at what that produces. A culture willing to challenge a bad plan in real time tends to catch its own mistakes faster. It's a big part of why American workplaces move fast, iterate constantly, and aren't afraid to publicly admit, that idea didn't work, let's try something else, without it being a career-ending confession. So the next time you see an American casually tell their manager, I don't think that's going to work, in a room full of people, you're not watching rudeness. You're watching the end result of 100 years of classroom seating charts, cockpit disasters, wartime improvisation, and movie heroes who refuse to sit down and shut up. If a culture that basically trains its citizens to argue with their own boss sounds fascinating, or maybe a little terrifying, you're going to want to see what happens when that same culture is handed a paintbrush or a 4-hour road trip. Stick around, because what's coming next on this channel goes even deeper into the habits nobody outside the country can quite explain. Drop your own theory in the comments. I read every one of them.